Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm happy one more time I got the opportunity to be with the brother and sisters of Zikr, MIT Shia Muslim Association Group. As Dr. Musallai said, this is the fourth lecture of a series of lectures titled A Discussion of the Story of Dhu al-Qarnayn in the Qur'an. And today we will be more focusing on what is called the Syriac Legend of Alexander. But although there was some introductory discussions and some completion, a little review or completion what we had before, kind of the abstract for the whole series, we saw it that it was divided in three parts, which is today we are really discussing the similarities, differences between Quranic narrative and other late antique narratives, which really the one which is important is the one we said is the Legend of Alexander. That's the really important one, as I will discuss the topic. And as just to refresh you that you know this is the structure of the Surah Al-Kahf. The story of Dhu al-Qarnayn is the verses 83 to 102. And prior to that, we have the story of Moses and Khizr. So I emphasize that is verses 60 to 82 because I maybe refer to it. And I think for refreshing the mind, and then because the discussion today, we need to have some of the story in mind again, and then also for those who haven't been before in the lectures, and also for the blessing. So I will read the story, but I read the English versions, but the Quran is up there. So, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. The question you concerning Dhu al-Qarnayn, say, I will relate to you an account of him. Indeed, we had granted him power in the land and give him the means to all things. So he directed a means, or he chosen a course, or adopted a course. This could be translation. When he reached the place where the sun sets, he found it setting over a warm sea. But also this has read mostly muddy or murky sea. So this is be careful, but I should be careful. Actually, the word which is used, and we hamatan is mostly there is a hamatan, which you can read it become warm, but hamatan is mostly murky or muddy. And by it he found a people. We said, O Dhu al-Qarnayn, you will either punish them or treat them with kindness. He said, as for him who is wrongdoer, we will punish him, then he shall be returned to his Lord, and he will punish him with a dire punishment. But as for him who has faith and acts righteously, he shall save, he shall have the best reward, and we will assign him easy tasks under our command. Thereafter he directed another means. When he reached the place where the sun rises, he found it rising on a people for whom we had not provided any shield against it. So it was, and we were fully aware of whatever means he possessed. Thereafter he directed another means. When he reached the place between the two barriers, he found between them a people who could hardly understand a word of his language. They said, O Dhu al-Qarnayn, indeed Gog and Magog are causing disaster in this land. Shall we pay you a tribute on the condition that you build a barrier between them and us? He said, what my Lord has furnished me is better, yet help me with some strength, and I will make a bulwark between you and them. Bring me pieces of iron. When he had leveled up between the flanks, he said, blow. When he had turned it into fire, he said, bring me molten copper to pour over it. So they could neither scale it, nor could they make a hole in it. He said, this is a mercy from my Lord, but when the promise of my Lord is fulfilled, he will level it, and my Lord's promise is true. Jahadahu Dakka is, we discussed it in Allama Tabatabai. It could mean leveled or destroyed, or somehow make it unimportant, irrelevant. You know, that's another way. So this also should be in mind. That day we shall let them surge over one another. The trumpet will be blown, and we shall gather them all. So now it is this. The story of Dhu al-Qarnayn really finished by 98. These are the continuation, moral continuation or appendix, or the transition from his story and his thinking about that everything will destroyed except the face of God. Then God used the idea about hereafter, because the whole surah is about this theme. That day we shall let them. So now is the judgment day. So he was saying, okay, whatever I built is good, but like any other thing human beings built will be destroyed by passage of time. Most of those old ancient buildings or what they made, they didn't survive. But even they survived long, like this Egyptian pyramids, stuff like that, they will level. Definitely they will live at the end of times. So then on that day we shall let them surge over one another, the trumpet will be blown, and we shall gather them all, and on that day we shall bring hell into the view visibly for the faithless. So, suddenly, smoothly in talking, God moves toward the hereafter in the story of Dhu al-Qarnayn. Those whose eyes were blind to my remembrance and who could not hear it, do the faithless suppose they have taken my servants for guardians in my stead? Indeed, we have prepared hell for the hospitality of the faithless. So this appendix, a moral conclusion or ending of the story of Dhu al-Qarnayn finishes here, and then another story, or which is essentially the conclusion of the whole surah starts. So we have discussed these verses in the first chapter, first lecture, in more detail. So we continue. There is one other verse which is very crucial because it's Ya'juj and Ma'juj, and which is from the Surah Al-Anbiya. So that also I will read. But there is abandonment, any population which we have destroyed, that they shall not return. Such a kind of verse exists, similar idea exists, verse 59 in the Surah Al-Kahf too, which is just before the story of Khazar and then Dhul al-Qarnayn. So this idea is somehow maybe connect this part too. Until the Gog and Magog people are let through the barrier, there's the barrier the translator have added. So this is just, it says, until the Gog and Magog are let through, and they swiftly swarm from every hill. And then will the true promise draw nigh, a fulfillment, and behold, the eyes of the believers will fix there in horror. Woe to us, and we indeed heedless of this, nay, we truly did wrong. So kind of these are the verses which consist the story, and this extra verse, which is not part of it. And then we discussed from Allama Tabatabai that what features regarding this person we can extract from the Quranic verses if we were in the search of historical figure for Dhul al-Qarnayn. So when we said his name is Dhul al-Qarnayn, we have to explain why he is called Dhul al-Qarnayn, and even finding that in his story he has been called Dhul al-Qarnayn. I think this is also a little bit hasn't worked out very well because people have found reasons some guy maybe could be having Dhul al-Qarnayn, but whether it definitely was called Dhul al-Qarnayn. And I think this phrase is Arabic and not translated. So in one sense, people in the Arabian region know that person by this name. And I think, although I'm not going to discuss the historical one, but I have some new ideas maybe also mentioning. But the other thing is that he was really a believer in God, final day, and follow some religion of truth. And then his words in the verses 98, 87 clearly show that. He was one of those whom God brought together all the goods of this world. So must be ruler, a mighty king. It wasn't just a pious ascetic wandering around or in the desert or worshiping. No, he's a really mighty king, which have some power and means and blessings given to him in this earth. Fourth, he came about a nation of evildoers in the west. How much evildoers, but at least maybe disobedient in the west, and then another patient people on the east. And also he built a dam, a barrier, which we discuss a lot in the third lecture about it. So these features, I think, is good we have in mind, and as a review of the whole discussion. So look, I said few stuff, one in this verses, as a result of the hadiths and as a result of what we discussed today, some stories which narrated in the Near East, Middle East from ancient times has given many, many metaphysical dimensions to it. And then sometimes the trip is still, you see people, even the commentaries in contemporary times, thinking going to the west, where the sun sets, you have to extreme part of the earth, and the west east, you have to go extreme part of the earth. But it doesn't make sense. Earth is spherical, and it doesn't matter you go to Atlantic Ocean or Pacific Ocean. Everywhere is the same. And essentially, you can see sunset or sun going in a body of water. If you have in a lake or something, you have a decent size of water. If you, as I said, example in Michigan, you go to the west, clearly in the shore, you can see sun going, setting in the lake. You feel sun is going in the lake, which is muddy and dark. I explained at the sunset, the red of light, it makes the lake dark. And then you feel the sun is setting in a maybe dark, warm water. And then the sunrise wasn't necessary water in the Quran, but even you can see the sunrise in the other side, in the east, any decent body of water. And then when I was discussing the historical figures, as I said, you can find many places a decent sunset and sunrise which match Quranic one. If you have big flat land, and then because the curvature of the earth, you see sun is going behind the horizon, and then you feel that's the sun's place of sunrise or sunset, or coming out of the horizon. But still, because the people in the east and the west were different, it must be a decent sized trip, maybe bigger than Michigan. As I said, you can have that experience of sun rising from the east of Michigan or sunset in the west of Michigan. But because you see in the west, he travel, find the people which are rebellious, and the east find people cannot understand his language. So the travel should be bigger. I discuss a little bit bigger, but I'm not even discussing with Cyrus or Darius or Alexander. You can find many other places. You don't need necessarily to go to places I showed. But the other wrong thing, which still is there, and people thinking of flat earth cosmology, still reading these verses and adding many miraculous things to it. Really, they want to think he must be the guy near Atlantic Ocean because that's the place sun sets, which is not true, and or Pacific Ocean when the sun rises, or somewhere around there. Still we see, I mean, scholars and even other people, even some of the Western scholars, then sometimes because they want to impose flat earth view also in the Quran, which doesn't, there's nothing over there. It's just that apparently sun sets. As I said, we are more inclined, and today will be there, something related to maybe Alexander or Cyrus. This is Alexander Empire. I was more inclined to Cyrus, but and now after reading, I added it could be one of the Sassanid kings too, and I will show you some reasons. But we're not stuck in the historical one. But the name also, I'm not sure how much detail we can to go. But look, this name was called Iberia. The same Spain was called Iberia, Albania. Even we have Albania here, Albania in Europe. So some of these names, I'm not sure how much detail we can go, but I want you to see this is Alexander Empire, but the one I think Cyrus, I think, was more to the thing, as I said, that western part either could be here or even Black Sea, which already called Black, and he was to the shore of them. And then the eastern people, I most probably is here, the nomadic people here. And then the dam was said is somewhere here, which we discuss a lot about the dam. Everything we read and then even discuss today suggests the dam is the Darial. That there are always confusion. I say there is one Caspian gates, which is this is what Alexander really went through, and then maybe the one in Gorgan, because also blocked the Caspian, which is this Caspian Sea, Caspian Lake. But there is the Kafkaz area, Caucasia, and then here the two dams were Darial and Derbent. And then you will see that initially most writers were thinking it's Darial, but gradually, for some historical reasons, they switched it to this. The one which last time I argued and still I think matches better, anyone who's seen this Alexander, this is the Darial one. And but again, we are not much in the historical part, but there are confusions historically about this, and people have discussed. The Gog and Magog, who they are, today we are going to call them Huns, which is another name for these groups of people. Last lecture, we were talking about the Scythians. They have attacked from this western area to the Persian plateau. This is the one which is the latter attack, is the one which is the Derbent, but the one which we would in time of Zulqarnayn or Cyrus, I think people were concerned is here. We'll see that a little bit. And then the other thing, this is the background, which maybe I should mention, although let me, I have to go to appendix, sorry. This background is important, even more than even this lecture. I don't want to say it, but now I'm mentioning it. Look, there is an important war between Sassanid Empire and Persian Empire and Byzantine Empire. They were rival each other for 700 years, for a long time. When the Iranian were Ashkani and Arsacids were ruling, and the Sassanids came to the power, and then Rome was really West and Eastern Rome were together, and then Rome split in two parts, and they were fighting each other. But actually, never the wars become this large scale and this long, and the Byzantine side. This is the last war they had. And then this date is important. Look, it happened between 600 to 628. That matches the 610 is the start of the prophecy of Prophet Muhammad, roughly is around this time. And then 622 is the Hijrah. So bulk of these war is overlapping with the time of the Prophet Muhammad. And these big things were happening outside the Arabian Peninsula. I mean, even I myself had the theory, the reason Abu Talib get poor and because he was wealthy and then relatively because Prophet Muhammad worked with him. But at some later stage, which is around this time, 602, because Imam Ali was about 10 years old when the first revelation came, so around 610. So he must, I mean, we know he passed 661, but remember he martyred 661. So, and then it is Qamari years, so 2-3 years difference. So Imam Ali most probably was born around 600 Hijrah, so 600 AD. So, and then exactly around this time, maybe because of this war, Abu Talib lost his wealth. Maybe one of his caravans were confiscated, damaged. And then we know suddenly his fortune changed. The hadiths are not very clear. And then Prophet should adopt Imam Ali to help him. And exactly time matches. Around 602, 603, if lose his wealth, then Imam Ali is 2-3 years old and come to the house of Prophet. So I'm saying this war was big and maybe have some effects at some part of the Meccan trade or other stuff, which Western scholars recently are getting much interested in it. We need to know just this about this time. I'm not going to go to the full part of it because it's challenging. We don't need time for that. But the only part is this, that the really important battlefront for some time was here. And then remember that Derbent Dam is here. But the one which is Darial is, you see the Cyrus River is around here, is around Lazikia. So these two maps have in mind that the one which is Darial, which I think it's the one Zulqarnain made. This one really was made by Sasanian. Anushirvan, the Khosrow I made it. But this was also the control of Sassanids around here. But it must be around here, I'm thinking is here, because we had the last discussion, which is the river Cyrus is mentioned near that. So it's most probably here, around here. Okay, so I think this is the one I'm thinking is good introduction till now. Let's see what I want. Go for that. Yeah. One other thing I say, when I was studying, I got the idea it could be Zulqarnain be some of the Sassanid kings too. Myself, I think about the first, and maybe the Khosrow the first Anushirvan, which sometimes in Islamic context they called him Anushirvan the Just. But more Ghuwad because he had some religious sense and reform in him too. But the point I'm saying, I'm not going to discuss that because look, I have other pictures. Even there was a coin picture, I didn't put it. Look, the crown of them this one. I mean, you may think it is halal, but I think it's more horn. And this one definitely is horn. And I'm thinking Arabs know more actually at that time. Some of them, especially in Yemen, under ruler of the Sassanid kings. And this name people have discussed as very, although other languages have used it too, but it's other parts of Arabia use it too, but it's purely Arabic. And we know, for example, with Shapur the first, one of or second, one of the other kings of Sassanid, they call him Zolaktaf, the owner of the shoulders. So Zulqarnain, the owner of the horn. And I'm thinking this may be, and that this horn means the power to rule the whole world. This is the kind of grandeur, like Arya Mer, the light of Aryans or the son of Aryans or for example, the previous shot, they always have big titles. And then you see all of these kings have this horn type of thing there too. And I'm thinking I have to do some more research, and you see in the coin that somehow maybe Zulqarnain also they're having a title, which there are some mentions of when we look at Allama. Some people had said in Tabari, okay, maybe there's a horn is a sign of the control out two sides of the world, east and west, something like that. So, but anyway, this is not the line we want to go through. But okay, what I want to discuss is this about the Quran, because this is our discuss. I'll put this picture when I go a little bit through it, maybe then I will read it. Look, Quran, when it does something interesting, it does with the stories. If you read, um, it when narrates the story, for example, biblical stories, like even Joseph's story, Hazrat Yusuf, the chapter 12, which is the surah, the Quran clearly says, I'm telling you a story. I mean, as an al-Qasas, it says, okay, I want to tell you a story, I will tell you a story, and is the full chapter is one story, and it matches very good and closely with the Bible. But if you look to the story of Joseph in Genesis, I really recommend people to read the English version of Quran and read the Genesis. There are similarities. A skeleton is similar. You see the similarities, but differences, important differences in the minor. And some of those minor differences are not very minor. Completely change the plot, completely change the character, completely change the whole spirit of the story. Quran adapts and change the stories to his own picture, or at least we can, maybe the other way we can say, Quran when narrates the story, biblical stories, the stories where Jews and Christians know, all of the stories are like that, essentially. Actually, surprisingly, it's not one or two. Every story, more or less, Quran touches is some aspects and important aspects is different, and it is doing what it is sometimes corroborating some features of the story. People's stories had it before him, people of the book, sometimes corrected, clarifying it, tab'in and tasdiq wa tasheeh. So sometimes it's clear, clarifying a point. Itself says, even Ashab al-Kahf, all the stories, the story, or sometimes said to Prophet, you were not there. For example, the story of people throw a lot who should be the custodian of Hazrat Maryam, Mary. But generally, sometimes tasdeeq, corroborates, indicates, okay, this is true, or this is the case, similar. Sometimes clarify, sometimes correct. And very often the stories are different. We discussed the story of Hazrat Maryam in detail. There are similarities, what we have in Bible, but we have corrections regarding many aspects. Regarding from Zechariah in the Bible, he cannot talk because he doubted the God's miracle, and then he cannot, is a punishment, anger of Jabrail on him. And then he cannot talk the whole during pregnancy of Hazrat Maryam by his mother. So it took about 9 months. But the Quran is only 3 days. Many aspects is like that. And then sometimes this Western scholar says, oh, Quran misunderstood it. The source is wrong. And this is, I'm saying, is not all every story. And then let's read in the words of Walid Saleh. Walid Saleh is the professor at University of Toronto. And he said, this is important. This is really the main theme of today. And this is not only for the story. When you read the Quranic stories, which are some similarities to biblical stories or those prophet stories. For example, he said it in the context of the Goliath and David and also Saul. So Talut, Hazrat Dawood, Talut, Jalut. This commentary he wrote in the context of that story, which again, although Quranic story is brief, is different from the biblical story in some important aspects. Okay, the thing we have, the notion that the Quran is somehow misinformed or ill-informed also presumes that the Quran had unfettered access to information from Jews and Christians. It would have simply reported that information verbatim. This is a Western scholars have assumed somehow their arrogance has been, or the belief was being that the Bible is a correct one. And then they say, okay, when the story of Quran is different, it is misinformed or uninformed. And then they assume if Quran had unfettered access to information, they got it the wrong source, wrong version, wrong oral tradition. From Jews, Christians, it would simply report that information verbatim. This, however, does not tally with the polemical position the Quran took when it disputed stories with the Jews and Christians. For the Quran not only sometimes told us what a story supposedly was, but went on to dispute its version in other traditions. It is far better to take the word of the Quran in terms of its own self-understanding about such differences. The Quran, using whatever sources it had access to, simply believe that it was giving the true story. So that's exactly what as a believer did. Whatever the stories is, Quranic version is different. And so it's always some different sense in it, different way in it. The Quran was aware of discrepancy between its presentation of the religious story of the Jews and Christians and the one that the Jews and Christians presented. That's exactly Quran is very clear. This is what's the truth, and the way I'm saying it's different that you guys are not thinking it is. And clearly, I'm the God, I'm revealing it, so I have the correct version telling you. When confronted by the Jews of Medina about such discrepancies, the Jews were simply accused of falsifying the scriptures or mixing it or nothing. The case is even more evident when the Quran deals with the Christian foundational stories, the Trinity and divinity of Jesus. All were denied by the Quran. The Quran reminded Muhammad that neither the contemporary Jews nor Christians, nor even Muhammad himself were there to witness the events of the stories in dispute. But God was, and he's telling the story to Muhammad directly. When Muhammad was bested in arguments, the Quran ordered Muhammad not to argue with the Christians, but to have trust that God was telling him the truth. Thus, I shall argue in the course of this article, the Quran did not offer a typological hermeneutics when confronted with the scriptures of the earlier communities, but a hermeneutic of abrogation, gainsaying, and retelling. Typological hermeneutics, is you want to retelling or saying exactly or seeing what was the previous text was saying, but maybe, saying, this is the same thing, a little bit different. This is the word kind of mostly the Christian theology has it, that they see everywhere of the Bible a message about Jesus. Let's not go too much to it, but what we have is abrogation. The Quran says this is wrong, and retelling the story. This is important. That's exactly what we see, I think, happen today. There is one other feature too. All this, that's my opinion, my conjecture, but if you see my lectures out in Farsi and English, I've said it a couple of times. I have a belief, and I think every time I'm thinking we are vindicated in it. When Quran says something was like that and is related to people of the book or any story, there is a trace, there is a record outside vindicated. I mean, you Quran, because it's revealed from God, from the believer perspective, can say something, there is no trace of it, nothing of that. Just Quran said it was the case. And then usually because the stories of moral or ethical or religious or eschatological conclusions, you can say, okay, this is good enough. And the story of Dhu al-Qarnayn was like that, or many other stories. In the Surah Al-Baqarah talks about a man was walking in the desert and then somehow wondering about how people would rise. And then this is not Ashab al-Kahf. He died or slept for 100 years. When he wake up, look, it's food. The food was fresh, but the donkey which he had was completely powdered, the bone and all. all flesh has been decayed. And then, okay, this is very interesting moral, but is there any other story like that? We see the Bible has a dry bone valley. But regarding Mary childhood, we don't have Hazrat Maryam stories in the Bible. Even the story of Jesus, which does the miracles, the birds make the statue of the birds and breathing on them, and they fly. Every story of Quran, or even the story of the Sahirs, the magicians, or at the time of Pharaoh, these are not some of the biblical or Jewish sources, Christian sources. I mean, the main ones. But then, I mean, it could be like that. There is no trace of it. There is nothing. Just Quran said this was the case, and we don't have any other record. But usually it's not the case. Quran, when telling the story, and it has happened like that, there was a dispute. There was a difference. The version still was there. Quran is correcting it. I think this is better in the sense because, okay, he can say this was so and so was like that. And then we say, okay, we accept it, and Jews and Christians. So, okay, how we know you're saying the truth? But the Quran gives a wordage that somehow tells them, I know your story you have. I know the text you have. And I'm correcting it. And they simultaneously understand this fellow understands our secrets, understands our story, understands our version, but clearly knows and correcting it as more interesting, more powerful. And it has happened like that. Till now, everything Quran talk about for Hud, I don't know, Samud, the people, we have find trace of it. And it's just thinking Dhu al-Qarnayn's story is very historical because people are asking, but we didn't have any textual or draft like that telling this story similar. And then we see, okay, Quran is referring to and correcting it. For Hazrat Maryam, as I said, it is not in typical Gospels. We have proto-Gospel of James, that the story of before the birth of Jesus, or even the birth of Hazrat Maryam, parents of it, was there, and or the story of the miracle of Jesus that Hazrat Masih, which is blowing on the birds, is not in the again regular canonical books in the infancy Gospel of Thomas. So yeah, you search, and people have done in the recent decades. You always find, and then always you see again Quran. It's his own version, a difference and correction. And the stories of Qarnayn is like that. And actually, you will see that. I want you to have these 2 points in mind. And interestingly, I think this Western studies, although they come start with not necessarily uh, good intentions or good outcomes from the perspective of religious view, which I would say it, but I think the outcome is that now we know the Quran is referring, and this one text of Quran was clear. This is about something people knew something about. Because some other stories, even prophets, Quran says, Prophet, you didn't know about that, let alone other people. Okay, but this one they knew. But also, this is we see there are some evidences of it. Okay, so I kind of you're starting the story now. So. In 1889, Sir Ernest Alfred Thompson Wallis Budge, so the last name we are going to use, published a book which is called, edition of some corrected editions of some manuscript. It's called The Story of Alexander the Great, being the Syriac version of the Pseudo-Callisthenes. There was a book in Greek which called Callisthenes or associated Callisthenes, so they call it Pseudo-Callisthenes, but then the version of it was translated to Syriac. He found the old manuscript of it and edited. So this book, which he published, includes critical edition and translation of 4 Syriac texts containing stories about Alexander the Great. And then the longest of these texts, as I said, which is the name of the whole book, is for that one, is the Syriac version of the Pseudo-Calisthenic Syriac Alexander Romance. So this was called Alexander Romance. This is, look, this is known and it was Greek, but it seems translated to other languages and very old times, and in fact, maybe even Persians or Middle Persian before Islam. It also, under the title of Iskandar Name, which is a famous books or poems very commonly read. For example, Nizami has the famous, one of the top 5, 6 Persian poets ever had a book on under that. So this was popular. And then again, these Western scholars want to say, oh, some similarities of Quran and some other sources, like this Gabriel Said Reynolds and many other people, and said, okay, the the story of Khes and Moses is similar to Alexander Romans. There, the similarity is very superficial. But the problem, because it's just seeking the water of life, which even in the story of Moses and Khizr, there is never says Khizr is living forever, nothing like that. And that water, the two rivers, the two seas, when connect together and fish jumps in, is not very clear is the water of the life or fountain of life or such a thing exists. But the problem is this: Muslims for a long time understood Dhu al-Qarnayn, at least some part of Islamic world, western part, near Syria or Levant, understood Dhu al-Qarnayn is Alexander, and then has absorbed these Alexander Roman stories, and then they have many hadiths mixing this, and even if they go to Shia hadiths and mixing all these together. And then, so that Alexander Romans is honestly irrelevant for that sense, and we are not discussing this. But my conclusion about Alexander, the next book, Alexander Legend, will be opposite. So then it says there are 3 other works besides the 4 works. Remember, we said he edited 4 works. One of them, Alexander the Romans, the bigger one, the more famous one. The other 3 works are too anonymous. They didn't have name. One was medium size, one of them short. They were prose narratives. And then one metric homily means a poetic one, at least a rhyme in it, which assigned to is called Song of Alexander. So we have a poetic one, it's called Song of Alexander, which has some similarity to Alexander Romans, and associated the famous Syriac Christian writer. Then remains the 2 ones which you said anonymous. What we discuss is the longer one of these two middle ones, the prose one. The longer of the 2 prose narratives, which the Budge, the editor, the Sir Budge, called it a Christian legend concerning Alexander. Yeah, the title is he added because there was no, he made the title at the English title. And then this Christian legend is important. I'm not sure how much we can read the main text, but this is a Christianization of Alexander. Alexander as shown, which is real Alexander is pagan before Christianity, but it's imaging Alexander as really a true monotheist, devoted Christian, in the sense sometimes I think, I'm not sure author knows Alexander is before Christ, or he knows it, but he says already because Bible has prophesied Jesus coming, the first coming even. Alexander was a believer. And then we see some kind of that kind of trend in some of our own histories too. Or even when we observe philosophers, Greek philosophers, all of them become wise, some become prophets, Aristotle, other ones. This happens. But the name we are going to call it seems the original title was Neṣḥānā, I mean, Neṣḥānā Alexandros, which means the victory of heroic deeds of Alexander, which Western scholars call it Alexander Legend. I'm going to call it Alexander Legend. But these are confused sometimes. Alexander Roman, Song of Alexander, Alexander Legend. So I call it Neṣḥānā or Alexander Legend. And that's the one we focus today because that's related to the story of Dhu al-Qarnayn. Now, one of the consensus these guys, Western scholarship reached, although it wasn't like that immediately, at early part, Theodor Noldeke, which taught this is a book of 6th century. He guessed it in one sense maybe correctly, but let's see. He said it. He thought it's 6th century for some reason, and he's Noldeke. We have heard his name when discussing the story of Qur'an, the lectures about that. And then he was the first one in 19th century. Immediately when the book published, he said he's the first one suggested, okay, the story in Alexander Legend has very much similarity to the story of Dhu-al-Qarnayn in the Quran, so maybe the source of it. But then the scholars moved away from Noldeke regarding the time of composition of these texts, but not the other part of it. So they start to argue just till recently, just till unanimous, I think, near unanimous opinion was recently, I think December 2023 or around that time, um, that, okay, this is a book published in the time of Heraclius, the emperor of Rome. But why this Heraclius is important? Remember, I showed you to the wars of the Sassanid Byzantine wars, which overlap with much of the Prophet Muhammad prophethood, is with what 602 to 628. Heraclius become the emperor 610 to 641. So, and it's said that Prophet Muhammad communicated with him, sent letters to him, invited him to Islam, and he survived. He lived after Prophet Muhammad. You know, Prophet Muhammad passed away 632. He lived more. He defeated the Persians. He communicated with Prophet Muhammad. So they had the idea, this most scholars, that this book we are going to see, it is written around the latter years of the Prophet Muhammad. There are some arguments, and a couple of the guys are argued a lot. Now, just recently, Tommaso Tesei, which some of this work is, I mean, what I'm showing you is from his book, recent book, December 2023 came out. I will show you the book. Start to argue, no, the original composition of the book was earlier, about 100 years earlier or some 80 years earlier, somewhere in the 6th century, which the original guess of Noldeke was, but a little bit earlier, but for different reasons. They reject his reasons. They say it was wrong. So they moved it 1 century to later. But now he wants to go back. The whole book is argued for that. But this is not maybe as important. As important is that all of them still are unanimous from Theodor Noldeke. I mean, the three names we need to know is these three names I wrote over there: Theodor Noldeke, Kevin Van Bladel, and Tommaso Tesei. There are other people too have argued that Neṣḥānā is the source of the Quranic pericope of Dhu-al-Qarnayn. And pericope is this the kind of technical phrase they use mostly for biblical studies, matches here too. So I will use it to say a rhetoric pericope is something cutting out, came out, is a set of verses that forms one coherent unit or thought, suitable for public reading from a text, now usually of sacred scripture. But you see, Story of Dhu is unique, complete. I mean, if you take those verses out, is one complete section, so we can call the whole bulk of verses from 83 to 102 or 83 to 98 one pericope. They really think as this is the source of the Dhu-al-Qarnayn story. And there are more things here, because they sometimes may say it explicitly or not explicitly. Many of them seculars, many of them maybe Christian, do not believe in authenticity Quran. The two things they want to say, maybe one is this. So they stress Quran is using this book, and Quran is thinking Dhu-al-Qarnayn is Alexander. I'm clarifying the point. And then, but the Quranic image gives Alexander matches this book, which is Alexander Legend, which we'll see. And I agree, the stories are close. Contrary to Alexander Romans, I really think the stories are somewhat very similar. I mean, some aspects you see similarity. You have to know, it's like the parents or child. You see similarity between parent and child, but also differences, but you may see some connection, or even some group of people. You know, you can see Iranians are similar or maybe different from you can see some, for example, Egyptians, or Egyptians are similar, different from Iranians. The point is this, and then, so in that sense, the Quran was influenced by this book, give an image of Alexander, which is not true. In the sense, historically is not true, And it's like I'm making, it's like somebody takes the Rostam of Ferdowsi as a truth, while the historical truth was Rostam, which was just some hero, some strong guy, some in some part of Iran. That's one line, it seems, indirectly is included. Although some people have gone, okay, but you know, sometimes if I ask you who's Superman, because Superman doesn't exist, but everybody knows Superman, so I have to answer you Superman or Batman is that character. So maybe Quran, it was referring to Alexander in Alexander legend, but not historical Alexander. That's not a very good line, I think, to answer. And I think if you look at it to see what happens and the compare them is better. But the other thing these guys were pushing, and some of them, was to the date of the composition of Quran, because they were, many of them, revisionist. Many of them wants to, they were assuming Quran was composed later. They thought even start of it, the time of Prophet. We discussed in other series lectures, like they thought the finalization of Quran happened in late first century, so around 700 or 695 AD, not 602, the time of death of the Prophet Muhammad, so 60, 70 years later. So maybe these stories were absorbed by the Quran. So they were kind of when indicating they want to find a time the Quran is not codified earlier. So if they find the time which this Alexander legend was written, which they claim was the time of Heraclius, and if they claim Quran was influenced by this or copied this or used this, kind of the radical version was this, then Quran composition must be after this. So you see, this are all this line of the arguments were there. Now, some part of the argument, I think now, when they, for example, Kevin Van Blayden write to 2007, still we have that revisionist idea floating, but exactly that year after, you had Behnam Sadeghi and Mustafa San'a came, and other old manuscripts discovered, carbon 13 down, and the works that recently Van Putten and many other people have done, solidly pushed the Quranic composition finalization early with the traditional story. So a little bit makes the whole story of the, and then many people start to accept that Quran doesn't have post-prophetic, post-futuhat, post-conquest material in it. Then if you say, because you see, these guys mostly claiming this Alexander legend was composed at 630, absorbing material from book published in somewhere in some part of the empire, Byzantine Empire 630, is very hard. I wrote to some of them, guys. Even nowadays, the books doesn't travel so fast. For example, we have Rashid Khalidi. There's a book, very great book on the Palestine, 100 Years of War on Palestine. So is one of the best books now we have to read about Palestine. It hasn't been translated in Farsi yet. It's just now people, because they, even after 7 October now, okay, I see notice the Persian translation is coming out. So although the book has been out for a few years. So I mean, but still many of these argue with that, this feature or that feature. And then the whole idea, which is this, they claim that this Alexander legend was written in the time of Heraclius, which was a propaganda tool by the Byzantine Empire against Persian Empire. Remember those wars, which are very big, devastating. I mean, I didn't go through that because the Iranians were able to capture large territory of Roman Empire, including Jerusalem, Egypt, Syria. I mean, it's huge. And then they really think end of times is coming. So some of the heartland, which later Muslims of Roman Empire, which later Muslims conquered, the Sassanid conquered. But then the counterattack of Heraclius completely reversed, and then they captured capital of the Sassanid Empire, Tisfun, inside Iraq, near Madain. The point is this, the whole idea of these scholars was, which you don't have time to go through that, that this book, which we are going to see, was a propaganda thing by Heraclius, which is a theology added to it in the war with Persians. I mean, look, to very summarizing it, historically, even the two empires, Sassanid and Byzantine, for a while accepted, for a long time, accepted the other one. They know the other one is there, is the rival, and try to live in a peace. As far as the other one doesn't encroach in their land, they're okay. But in somewhere in 6th century or 7th century, somehow the attitudes become more militant, and they start to somehow imagine to eliminate the other one. But just sometimes you imagine to give a talk about it, but it's not real, or you cannot do it. But then this war started. Effectively, this was happening. If any of them had some more luck, kind of could wipe out apparently the other one. And then one of the things was there that, okay, the point is that the two character, which the history of each of these empires had achieved that, have achieved that, going to the heart of the other empire, capturing it, absorbing, destroying it, was Alexander and Cyrus, or partially Darius. So for now, let's do Alexander, because we look in this side of the propaganda. So, the one who really defeated Persians in the history of the West, and all of these guys, although they were Roman, but mostly Hellenized Roman, Greek-speaking Roman, Byzantine Empire, they think Alexander as their ancestor, the one who had defeated this Persian menace, the evil empire to the east, and has captured the capital, burned the Persepolis. So all those empires wants to imitate Alexander. Oh, I will be the next Alexander. I will achieve Alexander too. Like the kings want to, for example, after Shah Iran, imagine himself as the new Cyrus. So I am the new Cyrus. That many of these Roman Empire emperors, especially when the later 6th and 7th century things get radicalized, they want to image themselves as Alexander. And then the only problem they have, Alexander is not is pagan. So you need to do something Christianizing it. So I'm strengthening the argument of these people. Look, they say, so some features of it. So and then this is a pamphlet. This idea, even now is so fashionable. This Qur'an was influenced or reacting to the Heraclean propaganda of theology, even the story of Mary. I didn't go through that much, but we have some lectures of Hazrat Maryam. I alluded to it because some of the this scholar says, Christian scholar says, oh, Quran is talking about that. We don't accept that too. So Quran criticizing that or so on. Somehow regarding Mary, divinity of Mary or so on. But have this in mind, but that's the consensus of the scholars was. One of these scholars was also Tommaso Tesei, which is very, very hard line that the Quran is adopted this story of Dhu al-Qarnayn from this book, Neṣḥānā, Alexander Legend. And he was, I think, writing the proposal of writing something to argue for that. But in the middle of the writing, he started to doubt the standard dating of the composition of that book, which is usually 628 to 630. And then he started to say, no, it must be earlier. Now, how much it is true scientific or rethinking, or how much of it he has to do to save his theory, because now they know the Quranic composition finalization is much earlier. It's according to the traditional one. It is done by the middle of the Caliph Osman, not at the time of Abdul Malik. I think it's both. And interestingly, although I think if I insist, no, that late Heraclius is correct, because if I go the late date of composition at the time of Heraclius is correct, it wouldn't leave hardly any time that can influence Quran, because Quran, I mean, Prophet passed away 632. The book is just composed, and it wasn't so much. And then and the war was finished, and then Hijaz was far away from maybe not very necessarily close to the Byzantine center, so on. So it works better. But if you claim, remember we had the same story for, let me finish this sentence and go back to it. If you claim, okay, it was earlier, maybe about 100 years, 80 years earlier, okay, you can give the time to spread. But actually, I'm happy about that because this makes it more to the case that there must be historical persons of Qarnayn. There must be some legend, some knowledge of oral history about him. The oral history of him mixed up with, as usually stories do, with the other people's stories. And then Quran, they're asking Quran about that person, and Quran is characterizing it. I mean, even Tommaso Tesei had an interview with the Gabriel Said Reynolds. I was going to put it, but I don't think we have time. He himself said, look, yeah, the image we see in this book, Alexander Legend, is a composite image. And the story, because it's some guy wrote the story the same way, for example, Ferdowsi wrote or other people wrote, and what Iskandar Nizami wrote is not about real Iskandar or something like that. And then you absorb different elements of different people to make it more interesting. The legend of people naturally mix them. Story of this king, they put it on the king because the other king is very irrelevant or long time ago. People is not as attractive anymore. So you get the story which is attractive, you put in the name of this king and selling it. And he himself said that the Cyrus, this Alexander Legend, which we are going to look, has a mixture of Cyrus and Alexander. And then even he himself, they said that Alexander romance, which I said is really the similarity of the Quran is super. I mean, they're very general to greedy, and mostly because of wrong hadiths or wrong understanding of some Muslim scholars, not Quran himself. But that has some elements of Gilgamesh. So I'm saying Gilgamesh, if it was true, is a myth, but it was a king 4,000 or maybe more years ago. Some element of his story was common in the oral collective history of people, and gradually was absorbed. And then you see put on the image of Alexander, or could be mixed with Alexander, Cyrus together, and then people mistakenly also put it Zulqarnain on it too. Okay, and then the other thing I want to say, look, we had a discussion about Iqra, the story of the first revelation to Prophet Muhammad, and then we saw the similarity with another story of in Britain, although the lectures in Farsi. And then we saw there was a person, Cadoman, which is illiterate, but said some poems, which is important. English history of English literature was the oldest left, or the survived poem in English language. And they say it was important to converted pagans to Christianity. The question we discussed those three lectures, what has influenced what and how? Okay, there first the conclusion was that whether there was a Quran influenced the Caravan story, but there's some complications, you know, the Quran, no, the Sira ibn Ishaq, because the story as narrated Sira ibn Ishaq, but we discussed the details. So it could be Sira ibn Ishaq affected that story, or that story affected Sira ibn Ishaq, or there was another oral source, the third source, which both were influenced by that. There, our conclusion was that most probably the Caravan story was influenced by the stories which was orally going through the Muslim circles, but they were there and circulating Islamic world much before Ibn Ishaq wrote it. Now here we'll see at the end, if I have time, conclusions more or less will be some similarity. But this time is more important because that was Ibn Ishaq, a story about narration, a revelation. But here is Quran and the story about revelation itself. Okay, now after a little bit, another long thing, we start to the main part. Look, this is the book Tommaso Tesei wrote come December 2023, the Syriac Legend of Alexander's Gate. Here he doesn't discuss that much the relationship with Zulqarnain, but use the miniature about the Zulqarnain. But this book is timing the text, this legend of Alexander, but he has articles before it. So now, as one other thing I want to add, a couple of things still to add when we go forward. This book, which you call it Neṣḥānā Alexander Legend, has been surviving 5 manuscripts, all written Eastern Syriac script, but all are very recent. The oldest manuscript kept in British Museum sometime is 1880. It's 18th century. The oldest is 18th century, and the youngest 1886. So these are about the last 200 years or a little bit more, 200 something years. And then the other 5, the other 3 are in between. So as you see, one possibility should be that the manuscripts are after Islam. And I asked him, Tommaso Tesei, he didn't like the question much, and he said, go read my books and articles. And other people ask him, I think he's becoming defensive, but still, I don't want to necessarily go that line, but these manuscripts are late. He himself accepted, I'm going a little bit ahead of myself. Look, as I said, he's pushing the time back. He's pushing the time back from this period, which most scholars are accepting in time of Heraclius, the time of prophet, to this time, which is about 100 years before. But he accepts, or at least by the framework of the thinking historical critical method requires, because people counter-argue him, okay, what about this passage? Then he says, okay, I accept some passages were added to it. So the main story was written in 6th century, but there is only a part, which may be added in the 7th century to the text. He believes that. I asked him, okay, if once edition has been done and later has been done, more can be done later. 7th century can be added. What about 9th, 10th century, 11th century? So maybe after Islam, they added to it. And I think there is some incentive to do that because this story was known, Islamic circles, and unfortunately, many Muslim commentators, storytellers, Quranic storytellers, Ghoddoussi, pick up these stories from, Israeliyat or from these Christian sources. And actually, you see them in the hadiths too. So it's possible that some Syriac writer harmonized the 2 stories. So could it be that this book was also edited? Because you are claiming Quran is edited from the time of Prophet to Abdul Malik. That's his push. And they don't accept this book, which is unknown. 5 copies survive, just recent copies. Contrary to Quran, we have full of it from 1st century. So why no edition happened? So what I'm saying, I'm not going to go that line because I don't have that argument to go, but you have to have in mind this one, because the possibility of harmonization is this. And then I'm saying, if you see similarity, or maybe the harmonization has happened after the Islam, make the stories more similar. There were some story, there was Quranic story, and then the Syriac one has tried to harmonize. Look, there is a story, for example, they accept Talmud, the Jewish book, Jewish oral tradition, like Hadith books or all compendium. They always claim it was Talmud was completed before Islam, was 7. Just Islam came, it was completed, which is not. It was still developing, adjusting the first 2 centuries after Islam. So, but the point is this: they claim it is completed. So always, if you're naive, or some people which don't know much, if you see some similarity to story of the Talmudic story, a Quranic or Islamic story, they always say the direction is that from the Jewish one is coming to Islamic one. But the more expert academic scholars on the Jewish scholarship or Talmudic scholarship, say there are some stories of reverse. They're added to Talmud after Islam. One of them is about very positive evaluation of Ishmael, which I heard it in our hadiths that, anyways, long story. So it can happen, the reverse can happen. We cannot assume always that because Judaism is an earlier religion, so anything in their texts is before Islam. Many of their things are affected, influenced, absorbing Islamic norms in Spain or other places. Now, so this have in mind, but although still I'm not going to go that line because that's hard.
And I ask him where you argue. I look to his discussions. His arguments are not clear. I mean, but okay, let's put that aside. Accepting the book as it is, and kind of I will accept his arguments. The main part of the book was composed in 6th century, but there were some additions around early 7th century. So let's see what happens. I mean, there are some interesting stuff here. We really don't have time here. There is some connection to Iran. Actually, out of these 5 manuscripts, 2 must have been copied in Urumiyeh. And then one guy in 19th century, Urumiyeh, Iran, west of Iran, donate one to the American Oriental Society, one to the German Oriental Society. That is not very clear. They are not sure whether these 2 manuscripts, which they have copied from which manuscript and so on. And then one other important thing is this, always this legend of Alexander, which is our discussion, always comes as an appendix for Alexander romance, which actually this could be the source of confusion in Islamic ones, that many of these Alexander romance is mixed, and the Khizr in the story of Moses and Khizr is connected to Alexander. And this mixes everything. The 2 stories mix, and some confusion, mythological fairy tales. I mean, very, very everything has come through. And the other interesting thing, which I go through it, Noldeke thinks this language is also important, that the Syriac romance, that legend, was translated from Middle Persian to Syriac, not from Greek. But some recent scholars are debating that. But the Syriac legend is not like that, which would our topic with discussion is directly most written in Syriac. But one thing I want to emphasize, what kind of changes may happen, that's the reason I put it here. It is this, that in Syriac romance, the other book, which is similar to our Skandinavia of Nizami, and the people find similarity in it, and the story of, and one of the attendee of the regular Friday lectures, tafsir for Zek, asked me about that, about Alexander and his cook and something like that. That is called Alexander Romance. In Alexander Romance, in the Syriac version, all the names of the kings have been changed. The Persian kings have been changed. So in the Greek version, the name of the kings are Achaemenid. His name is Xerxes, Hashayar. Then the name is changed in the Syriac version, the same story, to Khosrow, the Sassanid king. That's why I'm telling you that time people adjust the stories, adapt the stories. The essence of the story may be true, but the guy says, who's Khashayar? I don't care. But the contemporary is Khosrow, the great king of Persia. You know, after a while, who knows who 19th century American presidents are? If the story is nice, can fit, you talk about Reagan or, I don't know, something else, George Bush, instead of talking Taft, Hoover, or, I don't know, Harding or Grant, which nobody knows what they were doing. And so this is important. So in fact, one of the most striking elements in the Syriac adaptation of the Romans is the systematic replacement of the name of ancient Achaemenid sovereign Xerxes with that of the Sasanian king Khosrow. So what I'm saying in this story of Dhu al-Qarnayn, Alexander legend, the name of Alexander is replaced a true name, or things have been associated to him, which wasn't as of him historically, to another king. Okay, it could be to Cyrus, it could be to some of the Sassanid kings, or anyone else, or Gilgamesh maybe even. And then some of the things associated to this Alexander maybe is the one that really the real Dhu al-Qarnayn, who he was, which I guess most probably Cyrus. But now recently I'm thinking it could be one of the Sassanid kings too, the Ghoddoussi or Anushirawan, because Ghoddoussi, of course, actually matches, because he had some religious reform with Mazdak, which is really, I think, was pro people, but then people rebelled against him, and I guess the name must somehow, the guy must be known by the Arabs or something like that. But okay, that I really need research. Let's put it aside. Okay, now, so, okay, let's go to the book. Now, I have summaries of it, and we don't have time to read it. And then actually, I was always reading the summaries for past few weeks. Oh, this guy said this, is said that. Honestly, I know I'm learning, and then they do. It's better you yourself read the book. If you want to read Plato, go read the Plato yourself. Or Kant. Honestly, when I start to read the story 8-9 pages myself, I really felt that better. And when these guys summarize it, everyone summarizes, takes something out, something in, and the sense of it goes away. But unfortunately, I have to go to the summary. I cannot go through maybe, I don't know, I was thinking to go through the whole thing and show you summarizing it, but I go through the summary fast. And then there is another article, which I'm thinking, unfortunately, guys, maybe the lecture goes to 9:30, something like that. Brother Masalai said from the beginning, maybe a little too long. And then I really want to go to the main part. You see the similarities, really, this is the part you see the similarity, and then some criticism of what the Western scholarship said. So I try to go to the summary a little bit faster to get the whole idea. So this Neṣḥānā Alexander Legend is a medium-length narrative, is 8, 9, 10 pages, and 3 main sections. Look, try to see similarities and differences with the Dhu al-Qarnayn story in your mind, and then we'll come to some of them. The opening section, Alexander summons the nobles or his council to convey his wish to explore the uttermost region of the earth. And so Alexander is somewhere we are not sure where he is exactly. Is possible, they assume he's in Jerusalem. You see some indirect connotation. So he is Christianized, living in Jerusalem. And what is his motivation of those trips is to see other regions of the earth. And then, you know, that their cosmology was that there is a flat land in the center, and then all around all the earth, the flatlands. There are some lakes or seas in between, but there is a big ocean surrounding all the earth. And that ocean is very dangerous. You know, the one which forbid them to go, for example, go east to west, finding America, which is Columbus at the end did. The nobles warned him about the obstacles that will prevent him from accomplishing his desire, especially the ocean. They call it ocean. The ocean which is surrounding all these, and they call it fetid sea. A fetid, very bad smell. I mean, bad smell, and also we see is dangerous, whose deadly waters can kill any creature. So kind of say you cannot go to the edge of the world, and then going to that ocean is dangerous, and so on. But Alexander decides to go, and then in this matches his character. You know, we have his story that they told him, don't go to the Sistan Balochistan of Iran. He wants to go to India. I think the time of return, he went come back from that way. When it's going to India, he went from north, from Afghanistan and Central Asia. When he coming back, he decided to come this way and lost much of his army. After addressing a prayer to God, which he promises to subjugate the earth to glorify his divine name, Alexander gathers his army and travels to Egypt, where he enrolls blacksmiths and especially metal workers. Okay, there are lots of things here. One of the things I want you to feel, because we know Dhu al-Qarnayn was a pious religious man, and we know historically Alexander wasn't, but this Alexander is Christianized and is really pious. It's better to read his prayer. So let me bring the prayer. And in this prayer, not only talks about the prayer, but also the issue of the 2 horns. So this is now from the text, English translation. So King Alexander bowed and worshiping God said, "O God, master of kings and judges, you who raise up kings and dismiss their power, I perceive with my mind that you made me great among all kings, and that you caused horns to grow on my head." Okay, this part is a little bit ambiguous. It literally means horns grow on his head, that is a human with horns, which some of the ancient mythology is, and it seems some older Christian writers think these guys are imagining him with real horns. But sometimes you think horns could be symbols of power, but the letter of the word here really means this is a man with 2 horns. So that I may gore with them, but you can take it symbolic. We can take it symbolic on his crown. But then he says, you grow horns on my head so that I might gore with them the kingdoms of the world. And then you see this matches many of our hadiths. Sunni Shia, a few of our hadiths, they say, oh, he had horns, because they pick it up from these kind of stories. Give me the power from the heavens of your sanctity so that I may receive strength greater than the kingdoms of the world, and I will humiliate them and glorify your name forever, O Lord. So you see, this is really a sense of religiousness. And if you read the full prayer. I don't have time to do that. If you read the full thing, is more very religious. So reading the text sometimes works much better than the summary. Now, but the point is this: he decided to go to do this trip. I assume he's in Jerusalem because that is one of the prayer says, I will wait for Messiah, and then if Messiah comes, I give my kingdom to the Messiah, which means Hazrat Masih. But if he doesn't king, I put the throne for him in Jerusalem and so on. But whatever it is, he got his army, traveled to Egypt to pick up some blacksmith special metal work. And you know why he has to do that? You know, something in Story of Dhu al-Qarnayn has metal, which is used in the dam. And so he has to get lots of blacksmiths with him, 6,000 of them. Afterward, the king and his army reached the shore of the Fetid Sea, so start to travel, the travel which takes about 4 months. So it's not miraculous, but reach that sea which cover all the land, but they find is proves uncrossable. You know, they try to, when they reach over there, ask some people whether you have any people which is are ready for capital punishment. You're going to execute them, some prisoners, some wrongdoers. And then they said, we have some. Said, so okay, bring these guys, let them put the ships and see whether they can pass the sea. None of them they pass. So they were, you know, they were convicted to being a capital punishment implemented to them. So he used them as a test. I mean, they would die no matter what. So that's it. Okay, he cannot cross it. So he changed course. He changed the plan. The journey proceeds, and Alexander, but then he goes another way. Journey proceeds, and Alexander reached the windows of heaven. Now, this is make it old cosmology, namely the conduit that the sun enters to move from the place of the sunset to the place of sunrise. So you see, this is very literally, Quran is not like that. Very literally says, this is the place, sun enters that lake or ocean, and then goes out of the view, and then there is some transportation of the sun that from the other side of the earth in the morning will rise. So it's like a portal or whatever it is. Sun is going there, and Alexander reached that portal. And then we'll see that after Alexander extraordinary travel adventures to where the sun sets, we suddenly find him at the place of sunrise. So he's now at the sunrise. Here there is an ambiguity in the text, a mistranslation, where he has probably arrived after a march along the cosmic route of the sun nocturnal path. Now, the Tommaso Tesei and other guys said maybe Alexander also jumped after the sun, you know, because regularly, if you go into the west of the world and take you 4 months to reach the west of the world, the sunset, then take you much longer because you're in the middle of the world to go 9 months or 10 months or 1 year to reach the sunrise part. Okay, if you don't use the portal, and the story says about 4 months and 12 days. So if very fast and suddenly you are on the sunrise, maybe you have a cosmic journey or a celestial journey or a heavenly journey or some other way, not a terrestrial journey, and going from sunset to sun, like these portals you see the movies, like that. But you know, it could be, I don't, but you know, in the Quranic one is not like that. Exactly says sababan. So it's a journey. Is a journey, as I said, none of them is miraculous. And look, the one feature you have to say, the Quranic cosmology doesn't contradict the modern cosmology. None of it is miraculous, and it's a very different sense of this story. But you see, there are some outlines similar, but at the same time different. So it could be the similarities, like you see Egyptian, but they're very different. You know, like the not similarity of father and son or that, but a little bit farther out similarity. From this location in the Far East, Alexander and his army traveled westward and reached northern Mesopotamia and Caucasus. So again, he was at the sunset, suddenly goes to sunrise. There, it doesn't say much in the story what Alexander saw, but tells something about the people who live in the eastern part when the sun rises, which is not in this summary, but if we have time, but I'm discussing the verses and similarity and differences, we'll discuss it. But then, so it was at the west, suddenly end up in east, now start to go back to the west and going toward the mountains part, which we assume historically to be northern Mesopotamia and Caucasus. so Kafkaz area, or Armenia, Georgia, and Russia today. After encamping at the foot of the great mountain, Alexander receives a visit from a local delegation of 300 elders, which matches the Quran. These are the people who do not understand his language, who inform Alexander do not understand the language of Dhu al-Qarnayn, who inform Alexander the land belongs to Persian king Tubarlak. So Alexander is somewhere now, is in the land of the Persian king, which all the way when he's passing through these lands. Or maybe somehow that portal thing was to not passing to the lands of other kings, but still when going from sunrise place east to this part, he has to pass the land of Persian king. But they told him the land of Persian king, whose Tabarlak is a long story, is not anybody's historical, at least, but they think is a play on the name of the Khosrow I. So clearly, one of the Khosrows was probably Khosrow I. So look, these are matching. This book was written in 5th or 6th or 7th century. The Alexander asked the elders about the people living across the great mountain, and he receives a long and detailed description of the Huns and their barbaric habits. These parts match the Quran well, because look, he asked about those guys start to complain, look, the Huns are over there, they're so cruel, they attack us. And then among the list of the Huns, they mentioned Gog and Magog as the two Hunnic kings. We discussed that the identification Gog and Magog with the Huns, Scythians, all different people, Scythians or Sakas, different names to them, and then at different periods people call them differently. So this part matches. Let's see if you figure these parts are close. This part's really, this is a part maybe closer to Quranic one, because it's not mythical too. But you see again, some minor diversions start to happen. After listening to the elders, Alexander summons his troops and informs them of his project to build a gate to close the breach in the Great Mountain. So now it is Alexander get the idea. Although you can harmonize it, in the Quran, people request from Alexander, please build us a dam. Here, Alexander listening to the people, but it could be the communication and ask him. I have to go back to read, see the summaries of all these problems. You have to go to exact wordage of the text, which I don't put it now, but for now, the summary says, okay, Alexander decide to build some barrier for them. But the difference is that all these old texts would call it gates, not the Quranic wording is like a dam, barrier, not the gate. But okay, still could assume that that barrier has a gate in it that it needed open up. It's possible. It's more reasonable to be like that. With the help, no, but the problem is this, here with the help of blacksmiths. So those blacksmiths he took with himself from Egypt, 6,000 of them, and moved them all around the world with himself. He used it here. So you see, it doesn't completely, it's the Quran says, no, we use the local people. Just that give me your muscle and I will do it for you. Okay. With the help of the blacksmiths previously enrolled in Egypt, he erects a gate made of iron and bronze. Quran says copper, but the Syriac word with copper and bronze are the same. There are lots of discussion about it. But there is one thing interesting, which Quranic verses had, and always that complicated, that prophecy about Yajuj and Majuj, end of times, when the other verse, it seems this story has prophecy too. And when the task is accomplished, when they build that gate, Alexander relays a prophecy which some scribe writes it on the wall of the gate, or on the gate, which it predicts the future raids of the Huns. So this part also goes to Quranic story. I mean, so exactly I'm saying Quran is correcting the story. That is somehow, there are two, in that prophecy mentions two raids by the Huns, which this wall supposedly to protect them. The story is put in such a way that these two raids hasn't happened, but Alexander says, okay, and that's two raids, this wall wouldn't be successful. But okay, all these Western scholars says, okay, stories like this. The first one already happened, and that maybe was the motivation of making the story. The second one wasn't in the first version of the story, but happened after the second one happened, they added to it. But the timing, you look, the first one is around 514 and 15, which I really think is close to the Quba time and the Sassanid king. So if it is, because If I have time to show it to you, I will show it to the Hunnic ones. We know that they really attack Iranian plateau or coming down and attack Armenia or stuff like that to Darial. The first one, look, the timing is the Roman Greek timing. So 826 or 940 AG is the calendar they use. But if you check the calendar, change the calendar to the Common Era, it's 514-15 and 620-629. So 629, 629, 2029 is time of Heraclius, is the end of Irano-Sassanid Byzantine War, is the time of Heraclius, and is the time initially the scholars thought this book is written. And one reason they have, because it talk about this invasion. And historically, we know that happened. Look, the first one we know happened by the Huns. I think they call them Saber or something like that. I had the maps, and these was through Darial Gate, the one I showed to you, the narrow one, and I think matches to the Zulqarnain's description. This is through that gate. If the Zulqarnain closed that gate by building, which Quran says, and the king which made it, I really think the king couldn't be Cyrus now, because if that attack happened, more or less people think is around the same area, which is Darial is. But then so that dam maybe that barrier, but the real Zulqarnain might be built after this time, which matches, as I said, one of the Sassanid kings now. And I went to do Anushiravan and Gobad. They have this kind of trips east and west too. I know it's getting a little bit. Let's not go historical one, because now for now I want to focus on Quran. And then, but the second one was from the other gate, Darbat, and it maybe says the first one was closed. They find the other one, and the other one we know before this was fortified by Anushirawan. And the historical books are like that. After the second one happens, most stories start to confuse. Like you see previously, they changed the Khashayar name with the Khosrows. Most textbooks which are referring to Alexander Gates or Caspian Gates or Caucasian Gates, instead of calling Darial, they call it Darban, because the Darial become old and not interesting, but the Darban has a newer, interesting story. And the second one, we know about it because Heraclius managed it to his Turkic allies to attack Sassanid. So each group tried to get Sassanid. So this one was a part of Persian Byzantine Empire war. But the first one, which I think matches people in the border, not protected by the government or raided a lot, build the dam. And there are lots of stories Tommaso Tesei had. This dam, the first one, Darial, was part of negotiation, discussion, who has to give money on it, who has to protect it, between Iranians and Byzantines in that 100 years. So I'm really thinking now, maybe if really the dam of Zulqarnain was built around this time, not the Cyrus. But anyway, that's our story. Now, the prophecy predicts events associated with the end of times. Yeah, the prophecy, like Quranic one, is complicated. Some of the wordage of it is this, but some of the wordage of it after this become end of times. Very similar a little bit to the wording of Zulqarnain, which says, okay, my God, when he promised my God would Jal and Dakka, but then Dakka wouldn't be 200 or 100 years, maybe even go to end of times. The prophecy predicts even associated with the end of times, when a God commands the gate erected by Alexander will collapse and the Huns will emerge from behind the side of the mountain to which they had been confined. But we have to see whether this harmonization similarity doesn't come after the Islam, because those Syriac people can read Arabic well. They're educated. Arabic was a language. They know the story. They influenced also Muslim scholars. This is one of the stories closest to Quran. Could it be they harmonize the story matches to the Quran too? At this moment, a general world conflict will begin. The conflict will end the triumph of the Roman kingdom, which conquered the territories until the end of the earth, with no other kingdom able to oppose this power. You see, the whole story has a story that the Romans will dominate the whole world. The Messiah came, and the Roman kingdom will will usher the end of the world. The same Muslim or some, for example, Salafis thinks Islamic empire will rule the whole world or some other way. Now, there is a third part which is interesting and something at the end of it, but I have to skip. There is issue of that Persian kings come, the war with him, the prayer, all those we put aside. Now, although I have been long, but I now want to do some criticism at how much the story is close, how much the story is off. I have to open another file, and I really try to finish by 9:30 because actually this is the part. So you got the. I mean, if you're fair, you see. I mean, you can tell me in the chat whether you really feel like that. But I feel this story is close. To be honest, there are some similarities. Much more even, I think, similar to the story we had for the Karaman and Iqra and so on. But there are differences. And then what we have to conclude. There are two articles, actually. Let me open them, and then we can discuss one of them in Trolley, and then the other one is... Okay, I mean, this one I opened.
So, Dr. Ghoddoussi, are you concluding this story and this Alexander is very similar to this Dhu al-Qarnayn in Quran?
Yeah, I think we've... But we have to see what's happened. Yeah, that's okay. Let me say it. Look, I think the story's
You know, back to the question the other day, which raised, I think, by Brother Rezavi.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned they are not.
Okay, the point, okay, two things. The one he asked was about Alexander romance, which remember the other book,
Right,
which is similar to, mostly related to the story of Moses and Khazar. That one, even I said to I don't think that's very close.
Okay.
But this one is reverse. I think it's close. But then let me say what, yeah, I think good to ask me because I want you to listen to the rest of it with what now I'm saying. And it is the conclusion in the article too. What I'm saying is this. This is one sense is good. Quran is referring in a story and correcting it and giving its own version, which is truth. Like the comment I had at the beginning of lecture by Bali Saleh, which there is a copy, there is a knowledge of it. It's not something out of the blue. You know, it's still God can do that. Okay, I'll tell you some story, some king somewhere in some planet far away. Okay, it's true. But how I can know it's true, I accept Prophet Muhammad's prophet. Okay, good. But this is not like that. It is true. There is some correlation in it, but the story was tainted. The story was accepting other elements, have become mythical. One of the features of the Quran, there is no cosmic, there is no even element of Mi'raj, there is no heaven, because, I mean, we don't have to go through that. One of these Western scholars have used that as metaphor for the heavenly journey, like Mi'raj. And then he thinks, and he imposed Alexander Legend on Quran that, okay, we will see that one. Look, yeah, the point I'm saying, the story is close. Quran is correcting it, but Quran is not getting it from Alexander Legend. Quran clearly knows what Alexander Legend is, completely deviating in some important detail and big aspects. Now, it shows the whole oral tradition maybe was there, but Quran gives you the correct version.
Okay.
And different version. Now, if you're a Western scholar, still you have to go say, okay, there was because these guys were pushing it. Like if you go to that story of Kadamon, they kind of, now they deny it, but kind of they first say, okay, Prophet Muhammad have a copy of this Alexander Legend in front of him, reading it and copying it. Okay, that was really not they say it explicitly. Now they're mocking, no, we didn't say that, but they were saying that because another Western scholar, which kind of said, you guys are essentially saying that. But the point is this. We can say at least this oral tradition was there. When the story was written by the Alexander Legend goes that direction now, and people heard about it, and Quran is correcting it and giving the correct version. Now I think you have two versions. Clearly knows Quran. If you see the differences, you clearly see Quran knows the story, but gives his own correct story or different version story. And the other thing is that, as the second thing I said, it is not all completely blue. There is something there. Now, the first time, these people know it, the story was very similar. I mean, anybody reads it, can see similarities. And I try to, when discussing the similarities and differences in the next part, you see that one. Let me open the second article too, although we don't think we can look at it at all. Mariana, oh, I had it here, just 1 second. Yeah, klar. Okay. So I will show you the second article, but I'm not going to go through that. Actually, we had the Mariana Clar for when we look to the structure of the Quran. I lost, so where is this? Yeah. So we had Mariana Clar for the structure of Quran discussion, which we really benefited. She was very meticulous, and she shows this accuracy here too. Let me make it bigger. Okay. But she's doing some criticism of the articles by Kevin Van Blader and Tommaso Tesei, and then she says, "You guys look, give the theory. You see similarities, but you don't see the differences, and so on." And I'm not going to go. I mean, this is a good article to itself. And because, okay, Mariana Clar is more famous and established, okay, maybe good to read. I want to go to the second article. This is a young upcoming scholar living in America. This is not published anywhere, but he has other publications. I think he's doing his graduate degree in some of the Islamic studies in university. I think he's in Yaqeen Institute. I find it Yaqeen Institute, and this is a good article. I mean, look, it's not published, but I promise you, is scientifically solid. I'm reading a lot, and then you look to the arguments. So we're going to read it. You can judge it yourself. And the point is this. So I had some slides. I think I forgot to save it when I come in here. So I just read this part of it, and then we'll read from here. Look, the first part is this. I want to read the summary, and then we go forward because I want to finish it by 9:30. In 2007, an article appeared in Gabriel Said Reynolds' The Quran in Historical Context, titled Alexander Legend in the Quran, authored by Kevin Van Blader. This article has proven to be substantial contribution to understanding the background of the Zulqarnayn pericope in Surah Al-Kahf, or the Cave. The primary thesis of Van Blader paper is that the story of Zulqarnayn essentially depends on the Neṣḥānā Alexandrōs, otherwise referred to as the Syriac legend of Alexander in contemporary scholarship. So they claim Quran is totally dependent on it. So look, I'm writing a history, okay? If I write the story of, for example, of Hassan, a piece, and then, there is a book called Sulh al-Hassan by Ali Yassin or otherwise. So if I wrote a thing, okay, I open Tabari, I open Abi Makhnaf. For example, you see that Makhnaf is about what I was saying is depending on Abi Makhnaf, because quoting Abi Makhnaf, everything is like Abi Makhnaf, the wording is like Abi Makhnaf. So then you can say, is this kind of relationship between Quran and Neṣḥānā, d-Aleksandrōs? This is the one they call source. And our answer is not no. And then let me put the conclusion for you, because before you got tired or something like that, the conclusion he got, and I agree with it, and I do more. Okay, I go to reference. So it is this. Look, these facts, and in addition to lack of demonstrative evidence provided by both Van Blader and Tesei's argument for the Quran drawing on the Syriac account, forces one to consider the possibility the Quran and Neṣḥānā are independent witnesses to a common tradition. So this is the minimalist he goes, because he's writing a scientific scholarship. He says, look, there must be an oral tradition, Quran reflecting on it, correcting it, or gives another version. Neṣḥānā is, or this Alexander legend is related to that. In Syriac tradition, all myths and stories added to it. But these Quran is not exactly like that. Definitely cannot say copying from it or using it. We have the same situation for, remember, Ibn Ishaq version of Iqra, Kadamon, and Bidi, and also the other thing, but there was a little bit more complicated. So, and then the arguments are interesting, and then I'm saying I really believe Quran is very much ahead of time. No mythology is in it. None of this cosmology, reject the modern cosmology, but the wording is vague. So in the sense, the guy at that time can imagine it in the flat Earth cosmology. I can imagine it in exactly matching, fitting with the present day cosmology of the Earth is circular or something like that, and all other features. Now, what I'm doing is, because we don't have all the time to go everything, we want to investigate some of the similarities which these guys have pushed, and they want to claim Quran completely copied, but already you see differences, so I can list it myself. For now, let me list it from this article. Then if we something is left, I can say, okay, this other feature is there, other feature is not there, and so on. One of the important one is that water, aynan hami'a, as I said, is muddy water or muddy spring. Some qira'ah said it hot spring, but is not fetid. Fetid is smelling very bad. Kevin Van Blayden, when translating it, was not careful and completely changed it. And then first, the other thing is that Quran first didn't use the word ocean. I mean, the word of Quran is important. In the Alexander's story is using okeanos, which we have in Farsi, okeanos, which is from Greek, which is ocean, large sea, because they were looking to the big sea which surrounding the whole earth. As I said, it is not necessarily to be Pacific, Atlantic Ocean, something like that. Even a Lake Michigan or something like that would do. But I was thinking, okay, maybe Mediterranean Sea, Black Sea, or Aegean Sea, or something like that could be. But that sea is, look, first the word Quran can use okeanos because it is in Arabic. It could use even bahr or something like that. But Quran use ayn. So the corresponding section in the Qur'ani account is Dhu al-Qarnayn initially. First also there is some problem with the direction of travel, which I haven't missed. I will come back to it. But for now, because there is another mistake in the difference between Quran and that story is this. We'll come back to it. For now, the first story is that when Dhu al-Qarnayn goes to the west, is go Aynan Hama. Okay. Muddy water, muddy spring, muddy lake, muddy sea at most, but not okeanos. The corresponding section in the Quran account is Dhu al-Qarnayn initial westward travel to Ayn Hama, where you see muddy or murky springs. Strictly speaking, Van Blayden does not explain this to be an exact similarity in the paper, though translate Hama as fetid rather than conventional muddy, presumably in keeping with the legend. He also refers to muddy spring as fetid water, so make it wake, but Quran doesn't use in this comparison, so it is clear he now translate the Greek one, the Syriac one, fetid water instead of fetid ocean, and fetid ocean makes it very different. Ocean is a huge one, so this is the first difference, but small difference, but it's different. So it is clear he considered this to be similarity between the two tales, which is not. But it is obvious, however, that Quran omits the okeanos altogether. It is not entirely unreasonable. Quran doesn't talk about that whole big body of water surrounding all the land of the earth. And then the mythology of them says, okay, it's bad smelly, and then it's dangerous, and so on. So this is the first one, and I think it's enough the explanation of the Ain, Okeanos, Muddy. I don't want to go through that. But one other thing is this, furthermore, since the fetid nature of the water in the legend, Alexander Legend, essentially bound to the fact that water is Okeanos, and the Quran deliberately avoids the Okeanos, indicates that one does not need necessarily to read Hame as fetid in the same sense as deadly waters of the legend either. Thus, the conventional interpretation of muddy springs still is plausible. The cosmological difference goes deeper. Why did Alexander wish to travel to the end of the earth? We see the following passage in the legend. As to the thing, my lord, which thy majesty desires to go and see. These are its people around him, the nobles tell him, namely upon what the heavens rest. So Alexander quest was to cosmic quest, want to see how the heaven, what is the cosmology, where are these heavens standing on, and what is surrounding the earth. At least the mythology is like that. The story of Quran is very different. And what surrounds there? The terrible seas which surround the earth will not give thee a passage. The cosmology of the 11 features heavens which are domed in shape. This is a little bit detailed story, but if you go in it, the cosmology of Qur'an and the cosmology there is different. There is a important article by they're Iranian, Iran هستن. Tabatabai, they're in Iran. Tabatabai Amir Sadri talking about cosmology of Qur'an. So you can see the cosmology is very different. Qur'an doesn't, as I said one before, doesn't assume a big sea around the lands, doesn't think the heavens are dome. That's another thing. The way, if you look to the heavenly seven heavens, are more layers, flat layers. But that one for now, I think let's skip. This is a very detailed thing. But at least what we have to remember is this. Besides that, is not the word Oqyanus is used, and Ain is used, and it's not used fetid, bad, smelly ocean, giant ocean is not used. But Ain and Hama'a, which, as I said, it could be muddy, it could be dark. Okay, at most it could be warm if you read the other qira'ah, murky, but is not smelly necessarily, and is not ocean. And then the motivation for the whole trip is different, because motivation of Alexander in the legend is to find where the heavens rest. But the other difference is this, is the direction of the trip, which is a little bit mixed. First, from somewhere he has to go to the Egypt and then pick up those blacksmith from Egypt coming back. And then it's going toward when you look to the fetid sea, the way the book, the legend explains, that Ain al-Hama in the Quran is toward west, because that sun sets, which I said is a poetical description. The sun is going down, and near the sunset, the light is red. You see the sea as reddish. If you go see sunset, darkish, because the background of the light, contrast of the light, and then it's like going and a kind of warmish reddish. So you see sun is going in the sea, which is that kind of color. So you can see murky or muddy or imagination like that. Or it could be Black Sea if you want at most to be specific. But I think this could be any general sea. But if you read this legend, effectively Alexander, when confronts that Petrite Sea, is on the east. But I don't want to go through that. So, the total direction is also different. But I don't think is a big deal for now. Let's skip it. But there is a difference, important difference. It still is a difference. Yeah, this is, I think this part is important. There are part of this story in that poem or song, which I mentioned was another of the books, is mentioned, some details are mentioned over there. So again, those also contradict the Quran, but let's look this part. It follows then that the Quran is in opposition to the legend here, and this difference extends to the next leg of the Dhu al-Qarnayn journey. Under the impression that Alexander headed first westward, Van Blader continues that Alexander later follows the sun through its course to the east during the night, which is, he's wrong. If you look to the legend, his travel to the Petrite ocean is to the east. But because he wants the Van Blader, wants to fit it to the Quran and say Quran and this are match, he kind of misread or mistranslate or kind of say that, okay, the trip was to the west, and that matches Ain and Hama, which is at the west, which is not. But then this produced some other problem. Look, naturally, if the Fetid Sea is eastward, then Alexander must travel back to the west and not to the east to the Mount Ararat contra Van Blader. Meanwhile, Dhu al-Qarnayn, after having reached the muddy spring, journeys toward the east, Matla Shams, where he meets a people God not had given a shield. Okay. Yeah, I think, let me skip this. This is a little bit detail. I want to maybe, yeah, okay. Let me sort of detail say, one other difference it is, we'll come back, that east-west coming back. One other detail it is important is regarding the verses of the Quran, whether you want to punish them or not punish them. So you see, after the Quran says, after having reached the muddy spring to the west, Dhu al-Qarnayn is prompted by God to either punish the natives of the land or treat them with goodness. And then Zulqarnain replies, okay, everybody does wrong, I will punish them. Everybody does the good, I will let them easy on them. And then they will go to see God. But the Van Bladel wants to say, okay, this is exactly true. Or what says Van Bladel wants to say what is in the legend exactly matches the Quran. But if you look to the legend in detail, and that's what we have to read it in carefully sometimes, this is a little bit complicated because Alexander requests prisoners from the governor who was in the camp. You know, even the sentence is some vagueness in it, that who are, because Alexander used some of these prisoners, which I said they're convicted to be executed, but send them to the patrici to test it. Initially, when I was doing the summary also was vague. But if you look here, we are not sure exactly whose people are and how they treat them and what is the punishments for. So you see clearly the story here is also different. So at the conclusion the person has, but as just illustrated, both the context and language make it clear that the governor and the prisoners he speaks are from his own army. This I need to a little bit read it more detail. I mean, I couldn't read the Syriac, but we go faster to the things I think more interesting. Maybe I skip on it. But the point is that if you read the Quranic story, this is about punishing some wrongdoers. But here is not at all punishing some wrongdoers. I want to say, you see, there are two stories which diverged. And like the species, you know, initially they close, but genetically they diverge. There are some similarity on it, but they're two different stories or different narrations. That mythological story of the Alexander legend, which they have it in the Syriac version, is a story. The Quranic version is another one, which is essentially correction. Tell me what historically was, pushing aside all these layers which is added to it. Okay, let me go faster. Yeah, okay. One of the things, this is the crucial one. Maybe the other ones, this one I want to spend time on it because this has been even the justification that some people, some of the respected people wrote a book and claimed Zulqarnain was Gilgamesh, kind of relying with this distinction. Look, this one, let me see. This one, let's read it because this, I think, which time we have. Okay, yeah, then we go to the, okay, this one is important, and then if you don't have time, I'll stop, then you get the idea how this way works. Maybe you read the paper yourself. You know, Van Bladen's most original contribution, that 2007 article, is in collecting the similarities between Zulqarnain's story and Neṣḥānā, this Alexander legend, is the hero's travel through the so-called heavenly courts. Okay, we don't remember anywhere in translation heavenly courts. He, through another article, every time Quran says sababan or asbab, he interpreted these are heavenly courts, something like a miraj, something to go into the heaven. Apparent, or something about cosmic, like those portals. Apparently conduits or pathways through the skies. Van Bladel has argued at length in another one of his essays that the variously mentioned sabab ways in the Quran taken by Zulqarnain are in fact reference to these heavenly paths. Van Bladel believes this detail to be a key similarity between the Quran and Alexander legend, but I said the sababs in the Quran is no way miraculous and no way even miraculous. Usually people call tayal moving on the earth, not going to the heaven like Miraj, or finding a pathway to following the sun, miraculous to pathway of the sun or something like that. But he actually, what he has done, he has looked at the different usage of sabab in Quran. There are sometimes some connection to the, like Pharaoh asked his Wazir to make the tower for me to see the Moses God. Somehow the word sabab is used in that context, that the tower is related to heaven, but just going up to see the heaven, not going to the heaven or so on. but he read it too much, and then he just said anywhere sabab is a pathway to heavenly court or heavenly journey. And then because the Dhu al-Qarnayn, even here he did a wrong reading. We will see that, which even Tommaso Tesei says he did a wrong reading of the legend, and then matched it with the Quran and said, okay, these two are exactly the same. This is odd, a special thing. Look, when the stories are generalities, having two heroes doesn't make stories similar. But I have some special feature which is unique. For example, like Rustam and Sohrab, the son kills his father, make the story a little bit unique. But you know, you have it in different cultures too. But some other layers you add, the two story become so unique features that make you, okay, you see these are two related species of stories. So as Dhu al-Qarnayn traveled through the Asbab, exactly match Alexander traveling to the window of heaven after having reached the fifth sea. Because we haven't read in the details, some of it is not clear. But the answer, the author says, unfortunately, there are serious flaws with van-bladed understanding of Syriac text. Alexander simply does not enter the window of the heaven. The following is Syriac critical text provided by Budge, including Baba directives here. Look, Tommaso Tesei says, van-bladed, the way he did it, when he reaches to the sunset in the legend, when the sun sets, we said sun suddenly itself goes from western part of the world to the eastern part of the world that tomorrow can rise up. Okay, that's the sun. Maybe it has special pathways because they have the cosmology of flat earth, or they were not sure what's happening. But then Van Blayden really wrong and assume Alexander also jumped in that portal. And then suddenly coming from west side of it to the east. So Alexander himself also going through that pathway. And then during that pathway, get close to God, you know, something like that. But the point is that, I mean, Tommaso Tesei said, and if you read the Syriac, can't, but if you trust in this translation, that is a wrong one. And then you see that sababs in Dhu al-Qarnayn doesn't mean anything to the heaven, like Buraq. Look, Buraq in Miraj is a heavenly instrument. The story of the prophet Miraj, whether it's a horse or whatever it is we don't call it cord, but heavenly vehicle. Okay, Buraq as Buraq. But this is not like that. This is not like that at all. And then so below is the translation. And when the sun enters the window of heaven, he straightway bows down and makes obeisance before the God. So this is a poetical language. When the sun enters to the sunset, passes below the horizon, then bow down and make obeisance before God, his creator. And he travels and descends the whole night. This is the sun which is traveling and descending the whole night. This in the legend, through the heavens until at length he finds himself where it rises. This is sun. But Van Blayden has assumed this is Alex. He goes to Alexander, which is cannot. He claims that Alexander bows to God and travels and descends and the whole night and until he finds himself where it rises. And then he think he is Alexander, it is the sun, but it's not the case. And Alexander, but then if you read it carefully, and Alexander looked towards the west and he find a mountain that descends and its name was the Great Moses. Okay, this is the continuous story. Van Blader characterized this translation as nonsensical. I mean, he says the translation of the original editor was wrong, and then he gives himself a new translation, which is, as I said, is wrong, because he said, and when the sun entered the window of the heaven, he, Alexander, immediately bowed down and made obeisance before God, his creator, and he traveled and descended the whole night in the heavens until at length he came and found himself the sun rises. Which, if they say, everybody says, if you read the Syriac, it is talking about the sun, not the Alexander. Everybody else except Kevin Van Bladel say that. So Van Bladel would thus have us believe that the agent of nighty travel is Alexander, not the sun, which is not true. And then if we not true, you see the stories are different. And I really, when I was discussing the Quran, I don't think the sabab means the heavenly asbab. So I think this is enough for this part. Let's go the other part. This is actually more interesting too. This is the burning sun, because in Quran we have when after in the West, which regarding those people to punish them or so on, he moved toward, he chose another course and he moved toward east, and he went to the place apparently sun was rising. As I said, it's not needed to be near another ocean or lake. It could be any flat land, as I said, east of Iran, called Khurasan, as the sun is rising. If you have a long desert or flat land, or like Ukraine, something like that, because of curvature of the earth, you feel the sun is rising up from end of it. So, but the problem was that he there reached the people. Quran says nothing covered them from the sun. Here you see in the legend have some similarities, but you see the difference. This is interesting. The place now is talking about the eastern part. Suddenly Alexander is the eastern part, sun is the eastern part. I'm a little bit, I know some of his part, because even to follow it, you need to read the whole story in detail. And then I'm a little bit skipping, but I want to give the idea, and then because this is a lot is used nowadays. Oh, Quran copy this, copy this. So I'm saying it's very different, and Quran gives his own interpretation of what may be a true story between people, but then they add many layers which are imaginary or fictional. Look, the place of the sun rising is over the sea. This is the legend says, just a narration. And the people who dwell there when he is about to rise flee away and hide themselves in the sea, that they be not burned by his rays. Look, the imagination is literal. It is not at all Quran like that. Sun went to the west, go beyond the earth, and this suddenly shifted or portal to the east and rising. But because it's rising, because they have flat idea, sun is very close to the earth. That moment rising in the eastern parts. And the people living over there are too close to the sun. When sun is going up, is very dangerous. Imagine sun is very close to us, coming for some cosmic thing, become close like at the distance of moon. So it's so close, it's so hot, so dangerous. So these guys, when see sun is rising, jumping in the water to protect themselves from the ray of the sun and burning of the sun, which is very, very that kind of fictional imaginary cosmology. They're thinking like that. So look, they be not burned by his rays, and he passes through the midst of the heavens to the place where he enters the window of heaven. So exactly all of those cosmology is the cosmology of those times, which Quranic one, the words are not like that, fit our today's cosmology. And this is, I mean, the people at that time could understood it. We can understand it too. So, and wherever he passes, there are terrible mountains, and those who dwell there have caves hollowed out in the rocks. As soon as they see sun passing over them, men and birds flee away before him and hide in the cave, for rocks are rent by his blazing heat and fall down. And whether they be men or beasts, as soon as the stones touch them, they are consumed. Okay. I mean, one sense, it says at the early part, sun is rising because it's close to the earth. The people in the sea jump in the water. People in the mountain go to the cave. Birds all escape because sun is too close. It's burning. Then when it goes up the sky, for example, time passes and rises in the heaven like the horizon, is farther away, safe, and people come out. Especially for those people which are farthest east, which the sun is rising. I mean, you can read that. That's the wording that we did not provide any protection from sun to them, like this. But exactly, but the other side, even we had it for hadiths, was very different meaning. I mean, at least is not this elaboration in it. And then Van Bladen thinks, okay, this passage can explain that part of the Quran which says where the otherwise known Eastern people who have no cover them from the sun are mentioned. Then here there are some arguments he gave. Look, first Quran says they do not have cover, but if the guys jump in the water or the cave or other ways they're covering themselves, although the cover is odd form, but they're covering themselves because they're surviving and every time coming. So the wording of Quran is different, meaning of covering themselves is a figurative. And as I said, we said they're nomadic or something like that. Although, as I said, that was a little bit different part of it. A little bit different, hard to interpret. And then the other argument is that additionally, the Quran, the people not having any cover from the sun lack it because God did not give them whatever is required to protect themselves. The implication being that there potentially is some of adequate protection that could be given, perhaps by way of construction material. This does not reflect the Neṣḥānā precisely. Look, I want you to see the story somehow is always the Quran similar and different. That's what I was saying. Even go to story of Yusuf. I mean, the best way is to find the full text, or I can send it to you, read it, and then can see your eyes, which are interesting differences. Now, let's come. I kind of try to finish by this. Maybe I go faster by this part of it. Here, the differences are more is about the people which in the middle, which they don't understand any speech between two mountains, and they asked Solana to build a dam for them. Okay, here as I was reading the story, I think we have close similarities, but again, we have differences. So one of the differences, another scholar with some, he has his thesis on it, has noticed it too. One of the first differences is this, that in Quran, people talking that we give you money to you, Alexander does do that. In the legend, there is nothing about that part of the story, which could be important part. The tribute and its rejection have no precedent in the Syriac Alexander Legend, but seem to reflect the common Quranic theme that the prophets generally, and Muhammad especially, ask for no reward in return for their services. And look, that part in the Quran, even we ignoring Alexander Legend, why that part is coming in the Quran? He once says, okay, you think in a story, people offer money to some other guy, does it, but Alexander magnanimously doesn't accept the money. But in the same kind of is what we anticipate every good prophet, every good king does it. So this is kind of that interpretation. And the biggest difference is who built the dam, who requested, who initiated. In the Quranic story, people request from Alexander. In the Alexander legend, apparently Alexander suggests, but although he met with them, we could say, okay, maybe they asked him in the meeting to do that. And then the meeting, the detail of meeting is not reported. And after the meeting, he concluded, okay, he's going to do that. It's called his army. But the most important thing is that who builds it. In this Alexander legend are 6,000 artisans from Egypt do it. But in Quran, he called their help, asked the people be participating. So this part is different. And then one of the things it is mentioned in all these trips in Quranic story, the natives of the lands are more present, more important. At least some mention of them is happening. In Alexander Legend, in every level, either they're not mentioned, or they're not present, or they're not as important. So that's a little bit different. There was some discussion, okay, because if you claim that Quran is getting the story from this Alexander Legend, some people say, okay, what you see in Quran is not exact replica, it's summarization. And the fact you see differences between them is a result of summary. As I was myself complaining that the summary I first reading for you from Tommaso Tesei from the whole Alexander Legend was a little bit different. I mean, there are detailed discussion. Okay, some part of it we agree. For example, the fact that Alexander tells, let's build the dam to his army, doesn't necessarily mean that the people didn't request from him. They may have requested from him in his meeting, and then he accepted, and then now he's calling his army, let's do it. So in one way, it doesn't contradict the stories. But there are some details people have gone through. If you check it, some part of it, Quranic story doesn't match with simplification. This is a detailed argument here. I do not go through it. Now, the two parts which I want to finish, I know I'm kind of now going a little bit too, is this. Okay, there are some about the plot of the story, but what about the two parts? Linguistic similarities, is there any wording or phrases which are similar, which could indicate Quran is using this story, or Prophet Muhammad had this in front of him, or somehow influenced. Look, if I say شما که از زن خودت یار من شدی, okay, I'm studying Farsi, but I say you say you are following me from your own imagination. I mean, for your own. I mean, okay, I use the first. Let me say I'm saying English one. Find a good one. Okay, I don't remember. Look, there are some phrases which, if you are, for example, okay, yeah, I say it like that. The question is that to have a lectures or not to have a lecture. For example, to have a fifth lecture for this Dhu al-Qarnayn or not to have a lecture. I mean, all of you have studied English, you know what I'm referring to. Is a Shakespeare Hamlet, to be or not to be, to have a lecture or not to have a lecture, to eat or not to eat, or to go or to not to go. So, you know, I'm just using a phrase, just one phrase, kind of hints maybe I must know something about to be or not to be of Shakespeare and Hamlet, you know. So so sometimes only one phrase is enough. So this linguistic similarities is Kevin Van Blader is pushing to say, okay, Quran and legend are similar. But and then because Syriac and Arabic, or Syriac is a branch of Aramaic, and Arabic are very close, and there are many cognate terms, that's a possibility over there. You see, Quran use sometimes technical terms, with like sakina, we have it. For example, in the Jewish term we have, but many other words you see that Quran, if looking to the Hebrew, are similar. Even the phrases, because the cognates are there or something like that. Here, Van Blader pushes on two, and then here the Sumuro, Taha Sumuro rejects them, and that's very interesting. This linguistic similarities and dissimilarities I will discuss. I know it's getting long, but look, one of them is this. Look, this is the conclusion, is that broadly speaking, the Arabic language of the Dhu al-Qarnayn narrative is very much exclusive to it, with no singular words borrowed from the Syriac legend. This is the first thing, which when you getting in a story, you're influenced by story, you naturally get some important phrases from it. So first is not, but then Van Blader had a little bit hard time to find. Then he chose two words, which I really think is not. One of them is this. The first of this is where God, speaking of the nations beyond the wall, say that he shall lift them on the day surging one upon another. But this is, remember, it's not necessarily beyond the wall. This is the verses 99 to 102, which is about the end of times events. And then it's not necessarily nations behind the wall, is everybody. Okay, so you know it's kind of rhyme or something. Then he thinks, this Van Blader thinks, echoing the legend when Alexander prophesies that kingdoms will fall one upon another. I didn't read that prophecy, that part. That was part 3, was long. And then the Syriac is that when Naplan Malakatuhu Haza ala Haza. Okay, Naplan, I don't know, but you know, Malakatuhu is Malakut. Malakuta, I mean. So Mulk, kingdom, Ahaza ala Haza, I think this. Now, after the great door, remember, this story is that after the dam is not functioning, we would decide Ja'ala Dakkan, God Ja'ala Dakkan. Some events happened, you know. Is it end of times, or mostly end of times trumpet? And then this shows that time, which everything destroyed on the earth, people are really going above each other. As I said, the example, like we test the rats, we drop them in the water, bucket water, and then they all want to survive. They push each other down. So the attitude of human beings is that they all walk on each other to somehow save themselves. So it's because it's scary even. But you know, the similarity in points is this. I think this is silly. As I said, like say to look, when Van Bader notes that the formula ba'azahu fi ba'zin, in particular, very closely accords with the Syriac haza ala haza, meaning one upon another. Okay, this is so general. I mean, ba'zin ala ba'zin, fi ba'zin, some of them from some of them, and then one upon another. Okay, this is not specific, it's very general. Even the wording is not similar. And then still they claim this because of this similarity. As I said, if you say to be or not to be, or to eat or not to eat, that rings, okay, I'm referring to, or to Shakespeare. But then interesting story, I want to simplify it, is this. Out of 5 manuscripts, 4 doesn't have the version Van Bladel have used, and only 1 does have. Even in this word, which I don't think they're that close, Bazofi, Baz, and Ahaza, Alahaza, are not that close, but even out of 5, 4 do not have it. And then the actual reading of those 4 manuscripts is this. The kingdom of the Greeks and Persians and the Arabs shall come from the end of the heavens, and 24 kingdoms that are written in this book, and they shall fall, and the earth shall wasten in the blood and dung of men. So they fall and they will wasten. But in the translation he gave is this. And the kingdoms shall fall one upon another, and the earth shall waste in the blood and dung of men. So this one of them has this additional, and the kingdom shall fall upon one another. Okay, could it be, first is one of the 5, I don't think it's close, but it's not that close. But could it be this is a harmonization after the Islamic conquest? One of the authors knows Dhu al-Qarnayn because they're educated, living Islamic land, they can read Arabic. He's not even like a Persian-speaking person. Maybe doesn't know Arabic. They see Aramaic and Arabic is so close, you can learn it very fast. They definitely know. And then some author says, okay, let me add this Bazan Tamuja ala Baz, adding to the story like this. So, so this first one, only 1 of the 5 have it. The other one is this one, as the something regard the second example Van Bladel supplies pertains to the prophecy. In the legend, Alexander prophesies the Lord will gather together the kings and their hosts, which according to Van Bladel finds a nearly perfect match in Qur'an 1899, where God says, the horns shall be blown and we shall gather them together. But this is different gathering. You know, horn when it blows is a trumpet, is the Surah Israfil, and is the end of times. And this is very often, there are 2 times blowing in the horn. You know, one time everybody dies, one after everybody raised, and this is the rising people from dead. This is a lot used in the Quran, and it's different than the one that when the Lord will gather together the kings and their hosts. As the author says, however, in the Neṣḥānā, this gathering refers to the assembly of the nations behind the gate before its destruction. You know, because we didn't read those parts, a little harder to understand. When his prophecy came and the gate going to be destroyed, people are gathered behind the gate and want to attack, while the Quran gathering comes after God has leveled the wall. And then the second thing is that this Quranic formula is so regular, blowing in the horn and gathering people. There is no need to drive it from the legend. And the fact it does not even occur in the same sequence in the Quran as in the legend makes Van Bladel correspondence here simply unconvincing. Okay, so look, for now, we look at some of the narrative lines. We said there are similarity differences, and we discussed differences. We looked at 2 alleged linguistic similarities, which if they are strong, sometimes hinting, you know. I mean, I cannot use a couple of you know, if I use some phrases of Hafiz a couple of times, for example, Dr. Zarif have published 2 books. The title of his 2 books are from Hafiz poetry. Payab Shakibai, for example, at the foothold of patience, or where I can find my fate that I can rest and to be patient and endure, something like that. Okay, some of those kind of Payab Shakibai is so rare in Farsi. I mean, nobody can doubt this, you're getting it from Hafiz. Those kind of clues are there in the narration of Qur'an and Dhu al-Qarnayn of Alexander Legend, which, ignoring that the harmonization maybe happened in reverse after Islam, accepting this book what it is before Islam, Qur'an came. Okay, maybe you can say something. Well, we haven't found anything like that. No clear linguistic linking, and the 2 he suggested were off and misunderstanding, and then only one of the 5 of manuscript had it. Okay, then we go to the other one. I try to be faster. I know I'm getting so we did linguistic similarities. I think I can finish it. Okay. What about we can conclude about relationship between texts, although there is also these similarities. I don't know whether I have time we have, but look, at least this conclusion I want to read. There is no denying that the 2 stories are very similar in places. Look, this we should accept. How the similarities produced, we are not 100% sure. We said most probably there was a real true story which become mythologized and get Alexander Legend, and then Quran have removing those layers and give its own true version. But the results of the present inquiry forces a closer look at Van Blade's position. The Quran is essentially derived from the legend, which we don't accept that. There are details about, as I said, the prophecies and the attacks which Huns do. And as I said, there are 2 periods will do that. That I think I said enough that we want to go through that, so I will skip those part. But one of the conclusion the author has, which I read it again, and then I will go to the differences. What then is the precise relationship between the legend and Dhu al-Qarnayn narrative? You can read his arguments more later on. We shall argue that both these stories are utilizing common traditions rather than one text being independent on the other. And the common tradition must be the one also maybe the people in Arabia heard part of it. Part of it went to Alexander Legend, but the layers added to it. And the Quran is removing the layers, say, okay, maybe this is the story, and that could match a true historical person. What is the exact nature of differences, and how do they clarify the relation between Neṣḥānā and Quran? To understanding we discuss about relationship similarity, but to find the relationship, and especially rejecting the hypothesis of these revisionist scholars like Kevin Van Bladel and Tommaso Tesei that Quran copied, used, or the source of it was Alexander Legend. Now they're weakening it because the arguments against it. We said we didn't say that, but it means that. Look, if I write a Maqtal using Abi Makhnaf, I like Tabari put Abi Makhnaf, copy Abi Makhnaf in the Tabari said, okay, this part I get from Abi Makhnaf. Their argument was like that. But we see these stories are not like that. What is the Quran is not like similar to that. But okay, I'm trying to finish by 10 minutes. What is the exact nature of these differences? How do they clarify the relationship between Neṣḥānā and Quran? There are 2 differences. One may categorize them in 2 types. Let us suppose the Quran indeed drawing on Neṣḥānā. Thus, one category of difference is that which is brought about through the process of Quran consciously editing and curating the Neṣḥānā material in keeping with its own worldview. Okay, there is a possibility, assuming Quran is using Neṣḥānā, okay, assuming I'm copying it, but I can change the story, adapt the story. Like look, even, you have Cinderella, okay? When you want to make a movie, recently for the even Noah's story, they made a Noah story a few years ago on movie, or the recent Snow White. when the director and writer, screenwriter want to make the story, they adapt it, they change it. It is the same story, but they consciously they have the book in, for example, Dune. Okay, Dune, the guy has the book in front of him, and he wants to be close to it, but it's still screen has limitation. So get the copy of Dune movie and changing and adjusting it and showing it, and then fitting it to his own worldview. Okay, one way is like that. We don't assume even is this type, but we can say, okay, let us suppose the Quran is indeed drawing on Neṣḥānā. Okay, thus one category of difference is that which is brought about through the process of Quran consciously editing and curating the Neṣḥānā material in keeping with its own worldview. Obviously, examples of this include significant differences between the cosmologies expressed by the two texts as discussed earlier. And I said there's no miraculous thing, there's no strange thing, since the Quran does not feature dome-shaped heavens or creation of surrounding fretted sea. This is, you see, it's different. Quran throw all those things away. There is nothing about Christology of this Alexander story, which didn't go through it. There is nothing about Byzantine Empire thing in it. So, I mean, one way would be like that. If I want to get a story and make it nice for today, contemporary it, and you see sometimes they make a new movie and make it Cinderella, I mean, for 18th century, 19th century, and 20th century, you adapt it, you change it, you make it today's view, so you throw this away. Okay, you can claim maybe this kind of process has happened, but we don't think is this, because the differences, also we have a second category of differences. The second category of differences is less straightforward and cannot be explained as a conscious editing of Neṣḥānā material. So, because those guys can counterattack, okay, we accept your argument, Quran is not exactly like Neṣḥānā, but the author of Quran has Neṣḥānā in front of him, editing it, okay? Editing it. But this category includes the trajectory of, but you know, the difference is the Quran is this, all of the trajectory of travel in the Quran essentially is reversed. The rows of Alexander hosts being replaced by the locusts in several places. There are differences on more, you know, and the Zulqarnain meeting with natives who could scarcely understand the word is different. They don't find counterpart. There is no tribute in it. So everywhere is different, you know. I mean, okay, author of Quran maybe has done that, but we could say this is not anymore a movie based on Dune. You know, when you change the script, totally changing in every aspect is this, is a new thing. You know what I mean? I mean, so, and it's still, for example, one of the differences, as I said, Quran doesn't talk about gate, mostly barrier or dam. Doubtless, some of the differences are possibly the result of oral transmission between the legend and the Quran, but it's difficult to attribute wholly to this process. And but then also it says there are some interesting featured linguistic dissimilarities, which pushes the Quran is completely separate or wants to be separate. I mean, author of the Quran, if you think God knows this Alexander Legend, you know, and actually some of the wording and phrasing of the Quran, especially regarding biblical stories, is clearly hinting them, I know the biblical story, but deviating on it. Put some clues in it that I know that I deviate on it for the other cases. So it's not against that the Quran clearly shows, I know the story, but my line is different, and this is my version, which I said the Joseph's story was like that. But this, okay, I finished with this linguistic dissimilarities. Actually, these are interesting. One of them, okay, one of them is the name Zola. Yeah. Okay, yeah. One of them is the word Quran used, and I said it when I was discussing, and Jawadi Amali also mentioned it when I was discussing it. Quran doesn't use for those two mountains or which the barrier is built between the words Tur or Jabal, but use the word Saddain and Sadafain. But the Syriac text speaks of mountains, Tur, when speaking of the final part of Alexander's journey, and then again going describing the local geography. So interesting, Quran has the word Tur, has the word Jabal in it, but in here, consciously use two other words which are different, you know? So you see, not only we don't have linguistic similarities, some conscious or whatever reason, linguistic dissimilarities is used. Also for that, Oqyanus and Ain, we have discussing this. There are some, regarding, let me finish it. I think there are a few examples I think is enough for that. Just let me read the conclusion that look, the two conclusions is this, because I go to the examples takes a while. For a text so short, it's significant that we use as many 7 instances where the Zulqarnain narrative could have used a cognate matching the Syriac text, but did not. Look, the story is not long. There are 7 words, 7 cases that Arabic and Syriac have a word of similar root, which people would understood it. Quran could have used it, but they have not used it. Which 7 is big, decently sized, and deliberately, like the Jabal I said, or Tur, Quran didn't use it, which deliberately didn't use it. This is in line with the general dissimilarity of language between the two texts, which even Van Bladen admits. And another scholar, Zadeh, which is Iranian, Travis Zadeh, rightly notes that there is a significant divergence between the language of the Quranic text and Syriac legend, concludes that it's rather tennis to attempt to historicize the Quranic account using material that may not have been a direct intertext for the Quran. Because they, remember, they want to use this time in Quran. They said, okay, Quran is using this book, Quran is written after this book, so Quran is later, and this time, and so on. And the very, this one we put it aside. So let's go to the conclusion. I think we're done. Look, the conclusion is that the Syriac legend of Alexander, Quranic account of Zulqarnain do not share a direct relationship between them, but instead independently draw upon a shared tradition, which shared tradition could be the true historical events, which was a social, cultural, oral history of people, gradually mythologized, a layer is added to it, and some of the layers, and then the character name was changed from Zulqarnain goes become Alexander, whatever it is, and then become Alexander Legend and become Christianized. And then maybe some of the tradition also it was existed on Arab of Hijaz, but Quran gives a true version. At least we can make, at least is not copying that. Evidence against the Van Blader thesis that Quran is essentially retelling the Neṣḥānā are several. So we say it's not even retelling the same story, because if I retell, sometimes I summarize, change. Firstly, one sees the Syriac account and the Quran ones are different in many places, even painting to specific events, description, turn of phrases. Van Blader has previously posited a similarity. This difference is pointed against a direct Quranic borrowing from Neṣḥānā. Similarly, the language of the two texts provide additional reasons to believe the two texts do not rely upon each other. And as we said, conclusion, I read it before. So, contrary to these facts, in addition to lack of demonstrative evidence provided by both Van Blader and Tesei arguments for the Quran drawing on the Syriac accounts, force one to consider the possibility that Quran and Neṣḥānā are independent witnesses to common tradition. I mean, thank you very much for your patience. I know it took a long time, so I'll stop here and then I wait for any questions you may have.